lowering the assessment ratio, everyone still benefits from the cap, but that's sort of less disparity in terms of how much. I think the disparities arise from particular groups benefiting more from the cap than others, as happens with any cap on a tax.
And then they've got to do something to balance their budget?
No, because, I mean, the levy is sort of independent of how all these assessments work. The city, any town in New York, they decide, it's kind of reverse math. How much money do we need?
Right.
And then they look at the assessments and be like, how are we going to
So if you reduce the assessments dramatically by, by taking 6% and making it 0.6, you inevitably have to increase the tax. I mean, that just seems like simple math, right?
He means tax rate. And listen to they quote the IBO, Independent Budget Office, George Sweeney, but they don't listen to him. If they listen to what he said, and, we've been saying forever, is that's not the way the New York City budget works. They do the assessments by just maxing out all the caps, up to the 6% or 4% or whatever it is for every class. They have a pile of money and they spend it all. That's the way it works. There is no budget process, and then they find out the levy, and they come up with the amount the money needed. They've never changed the tax rate in decades and decades. Bloomberg's the only one that ever changed it, and he had to change it back. I think he lowered it, and then he had to raise it again. The New York City property tax rate has not changed. They keep calling it the frozen rate, even though your tax keeps going up. People ask the right question. They say, my market value went down, but my property tax went up. Why? That was some person at the hearing, at these advisory hearings. They didn't even answer the poor lady. The reason is they do not do the budget by finding out how much money they need and creating what they're calling a levy, and then dividing it up amongst, and I guess basically it operates the way Mr. Sweeney said. They do the Department of Finance calculates market values. They make sure that they're always higher than the assessment ratio so that they can raise the property tax on everyone, the amount you pay, using the assessments by the maximum allowed by these caps. I think they're calling them 1805 caps. It's S7000A, that's the original law, and it's easier to give one name, but I like the fact that they're referencing sections in the law. So 1805 and 305 is the one that says things have to be equal. I can't understand how anyone can say that this system adheres to 305. There's no way it can adhere to it, the way it's set up. And I think on its face, New York City and the Department of Finance are ignoring an obvious law that says equal. And places like Nassau County, which we've asked on the Twitter finance account, they are afraid to even answer. And they don't answer unless other people post it too. And they answered thanks to Queen of the Click and people like that. And they said, yes, we can lower the assessment rate. They don't even have to answer because we know they can lower it because they've done it 3-4 times. You can look at the Wikipedia page on S7000A, property tax in New York City, and you can see the dates that they've lowered it. In fact, 15 years ago, I think the lawyer said it was lowered to 6% for Class 1 property. But this current point is that the 1805, they're saying that the... I'm trying to remember how they said it – let me just go back a second here. Let's see.
the assessments dramatically by, by taking 6% and making it 0.6, you inevitably have to increase the tax. I mean, that just seems simple.
But he means tax rate, as I said earlier, right? He doesn't mean the tax. What do you mean increase the tax? But going back to what the state attorney said is he's describing a real system. That's the way a system, I think, is supposed to work. There's a budget. They come up with a budget. They'll find out how much it costs, and then they have to negotiate to make it reasonable, right? There should be no waste. Get all the waste out of the government. That would save a lot of money. And there should be tightening of belts and getting rid of some extra employees that do nothing, right? And then what we should do is come up with a number, a reasonable number, and divide it amongst the wonderful tax-paying citizens of New York City based on the assessed values. And the proposal is trying to get rid of assessed values altogether. I would love that, and go to market value. But now everyone will fight over market value. And that is some number that people understand. And the Department of Finance is doing a very bad job, even though they try, to get market values. I see properties that sell for $5 million in the Class 1 property, and the Department of Finance says it's $2 million. That's $3 million difference. I see others that people have been there 30, 40 years, and the Department of Finance somehow decides that this property that sold for $300,000 in 20 years ago, 30 years ago, is now worth $5 million, $10 million, whatever. They come up with these numbers, and of course, no one's contesting it because they're not affected. But in the property tax proposal by this commission that's disappeared in the past, it may take 5 years or so before even that catches up. Their proposal will make the market values matter. And people are going to sue, I hope, like crazy. And that's probably why we fear, the city fears this type of thing. Now, this Tenney lawsuit, they're talking out of every corner of their mouth. And then the city lawyer said, whoa, Brownsville has lowered their effective property tax rate. Then he said it's helping. So it does help in certain areas. In North Brooklyn, Brownsville, maybe, but not Canarsie. Canarsie and Bay Ridge, and they never even talk about Bay Ridge and Canarsie and Bensonhurst, and it's very simple. You can look at the Independent Budget Office report, and it tells you the winners and losers, and there's all kinds of charts that show, and we published it down to the level of individual properties, and I'd like to show that again. And what will happen is you can't look at it that way. You have to look at regions, and you have to look at, we all have to look at the increase in market value. So North Brooklyn, almost uniformly, the property values have skyrocketed. Park Slope, I think of it as part of North Brooklyn, but I guess they consider themselves Central Brooklyn. Park Slope is also a little bit of a special case because it's always been favored by the whole time. This whole S7000A, but North Brooklyn and Williamsburg, I think, has surpassed Park Slope, but that's also a crazy area. But now they're arguing that Bed-Stuy and Brownsville are, according to the city lawyer, are profiting from it. And he's right. But that doesn't mean all poor people or areas with predominantly poor or so-called, they're changing. They're not only poor. And they're all over the place. They're saying that white people won't move to an area because the tax is going to go up in that area or low. It's confusing, right? Because they said Park Slope, the property tax will go up, and that's not going to allow minority to move in there. They call Park Slope predominantly white, right? But they say Canarsie, which I think they say is predominantly minority, has a higher effective tax rate. It's not that they have a higher effective tax rate, it's that they do have a higher effective tax rate because their market value didn't skyrocket like North Brooklyn. And we could look at the Bronx. The summary is simply this, right? Certain areas, the property tax is going to go up 100 to 900% or more. I mean, it's not an exact number. That's North Brooklyn and anywhere where the market value skyrocketed, right? And then these other areas where the market value didn't skyrocket, Bay Ridge and Canarsie and South Brooklyn and Staten Island and the Bronx and parts of Queens, I guess some parts of Queens where they didn't skyrocket, their property tax will go down by 10%. So there's a large majority of people that'll have a 10% decrease, and the North Brooklyn and anywhere where it skyrocketed, Park Slope, will get socked with 100% to 900%. And maybe that's a fair thing, but it seems a bit odd, right, that the people that moved to North Brooklyn, that was a very dangerous area, I've been told, especially Bed-Stuy and Fort Greene, and they were telling me about the parks, and it's very dangerous. And so they move in, they endure whatever, the crack, all the drug and the criminal activity. And now 20 years or 10 years or 30 years later, you tell, you know what, thanks, and so long. And it's like the Hitchhiker's Guide, where they say so long and thanks for all the fish. The dolphins say that as they're leaving. But in this case, it's not so long and thanks for all the fish. It is, you know what, you moved in, you made the neighborhood better, you supported the community, you changed the neighborhood from a very dangerous neighborhood, and you endured that, and now, the millionaires can move in, and we don't need you anymore. So, goodbye. That seems like a very strange solution to this issue, right? You should not be taxed for unrealized gains. That is a historic thing. If we're going to tax for unrealized gains, well, let's talk to Elon Musk and tax him for all his unrealized gains, right? That'll solve the problem, because he's got an enormous amount of unrealized gains, right? So if you're going to tax every individual for unrealized gains, especially people that supported the community and supported the community boards and are members of the community board, and punish them for doing the right thing, what do you want? Do you want a community of condemned buildings in New York City? Because that's what you're asking for when you kick out the people that actually built the city, right? And on top of it, is the city now, Fort Greene, for instance, is it supposed to be a millionaire's community then? And we just get rid of all the people that have been here 30 years, 40 years? Can't they let the buildings be inherited by their children? Or is it going to be simply, you know what, you served your purpose, we got what we want, let the millionaires come in and take over, and you obviously can't pay $50,000 in property tax, and so we don't need you anymore. We need the people that can pay $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, with $100,000. And that's what's happened in Greenwich Village, places like that. There's buildings there that are paying $200,000 in property tax. It's just outrageous. And I guess what they do is they're planning to sell, so they'll make their money back.